Welcome back to Green Disruptors Scaling the Future, the podcast where we spotlight the people and ideas driving climate innovation forward. I'm your host, Megan Kerr, and today I'm joined by Eddie Obeliunas, CEO and co-founder of Exactus Energy. From a basement startup to a 120-person company operating across North America, Eddie shares how they built a professional services powerhouse in the solar sector, navigating policy shifts, market volatility, and the evolving needs of the clean energy economy. Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Green Disruptors Scaling the Future. I'm your host, Megan Kerr, and this podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing, where we help green tech companies scale. Today, I've got Eddie Obeliunas on with me. He is the CEO and co-founder of Exactus Energy. So how are you today, Eddie?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Megan. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah. So the company's based in Toronto, is that right?
We are headquartered in Toronto, Canada, but most of our work is across all of North America. So we are licensed and cover work across all 50 US states as well, which keeps us very busy.
Yeah. I guess I was wondering, is that where you are? Where do you actually live?
Yeah, I'm currently based in Toronto, and that's where most of our employees are based as well.
Okay, cool. So tell us a little bit about, you're so linked with the company because you're the founder. So tell us who you are, how you got started, and kind of part of the personal journey of that.
Yeah, as you might be able to hear, I'm Australian. So I finished my engineering and business degrees in Australia and then was working as an engineer there and was really trying to get into the renewable energy space. And at the time, Canada had a really good feed-in tariff program for solar. So I was able to get a 2-year working holiday visa and come over here and dive right into the Canadian life. And, it was quite a process getting a job here, and eventually broke in and was able to work for a solar racking company where I got a lot of experience. And from there, I could sort of see that there was a space or an opening for providing professional services. We were selling racking at the time, but my job involved going out and surveying rooftops and measuring them up. And no one else in the office or the industry really seemed to like going out to site and doing the manual work. And I loved it. And it was a service that was needed. So I got together with Matt, my business partner, and said, I've got this business idea. We went out and started selling it and providing rooftop solar surveys initially. And then that grew into residential solar surveys. We were probably one of the first solar companies to start using drone technology. And then that grew further into electrical and structural engineering work. So things evolved, and now we're 120 odd employees and servicing, all provinces in Canada and 50 states in the US. So that was almost 10 years ago to the day, which is a pretty exciting milestone as well.
I was going to say that was going to be my next question. So, that's a lot of progress in a decade. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one quote that Matt and I that resonates with us has always been, you always overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in a year. And we often look back on that and
that is
think, wow, we did a lot.
Similar thing I have.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag on the on my audio.
Yeah, you're okay. I interrupted you, so go ahead and finish what you were saying.
Sorry, that didn't quite come through.
Oh, man, we're having trouble. Riverside's usually pretty good about getting rid of the lag post-recording, but I know that's so annoying right now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's... I'm just switching my internet, sorry.
I can still hear you, and now you froze. Darn it.
Is that any better?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I've been able to hear you all along. I can just tell that there's a delay between when I talk and when you hear me.
Yeah, I switched to my my phone internet here because I think my Wi-Fi is causing me trouble. So hopefully that's better.
Yeah, it seems like it can be better. And it usually turns out a little better post, like when I get the recording back, so we'll be okay, and I'll edit this part out. But why don't you go back and talk about the quote of underestimating what you can do in a year?
Yeah, I guess that quote, you often underestimate what you can do in a day, but overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in a year is one that really resonates with my business partner, Matt. And that's really evident when you look back over the past year and the growth that Exactus has had, and the past 10 years really. And we started in Matt's parents' basement, and it was a legitimate bootstrap startup, with two young guys, didn't have any money, didn't have any, we've never raised capital or financing. We've all our earnings have been put back into the company, and we've grown from there. So it was definitely some lean years in the first few years, and you're hiring employees, and then you've moved from the basement to the garage, and you convert that, and we had 10 people in his parents' garage at one point before we actually got an office.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it's when you think back on those days, that was like 2.5, 3 years before we even got an office, and now, the work that we're doing and the number of employees we have, and growing year on year and being profitable and riding the solar coaster with recently tariffs and trade and all this sort of thing, and that's been a constant thing in the solar industry as it evolves. Lots of ups and downs. Yeah, a lot of progress made as well, and a lot of solar deployed, which is ultimately the end goal.
Yeah, that's true. The impact climate-wise. So I noticed what you said just a second ago about particularly in the last year. Could you give me maybe like a highlight of what's been happening more recently?
Yeah, sure. It's well, what hasn't been happening, I guess, is another way to put that one. But there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, obviously, and that makes it really hard to plan. But we've always prided ourselves on being nimble and adaptable, and we're Canadian based, and we didn't move into the US until probably 5 or 6 years ago. So the main reason we got into the US was because there was a change of government in Canada provincially, which is at the state level, I guess. You don't have provinces in the US, but and that was a conservative government. They completely ripped up the solar program, and that was it. You went from a booming solar industry. I think Ontario was the second largest installer of solar after California in North America, to almost nothing in 6 months.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so that was that was the first time we really experienced the seismic change like that, and that's, we could see it coming. Like, the writing was on the wall. All the polls were saying the Conservatives were going to get in, and they were very proud to be ripping up the renewable programs. So we were like, all right, we've got 6 months to do something, and we got on our horse and really started selling into the US, and we got a couple of lucky breaks and brought on some decent sized clients, and we're able to continue without too many disruptions to our actual business. We didn't have to do layoffs. We actually grew and scaled significantly, and when you look back on that, it was a blessing in disguise. And they say never let chaos creates opportunities, or never let a disaster go to waste or whatever, and that's a really great opportunity looking back on that. So we're sort of going through a similar situation now. There's been a change of government. We're not really sure what they're going to do with renewables. They're scrapping a lot of things with their budget revisions. We're waiting. I think the next 3 or 4 weeks is really the critical time. This is going to go to Congress, and they're going to vote. So we're sort of hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst, and talking to our clients.
What can you do when obviously that volatility is probably always going to exist in one form or another? So like, how does a solar company protect themselves?
Yeah, we don't install the solar. We provide the professional services for it. So I guess the solar companies, they have purchased equipment and solar panels up front and before the tariffs, but that will come and affect us later. For us as a service provider, we've been planning for this since early last year, and we've actually expanded our services into legal boundary surveying, or ALTA surveys, which are required for solar projects but are not just confined to solar. We've also launched Exactus Engineering. We obviously do a lot of engineering for solar, electrical and structural and civil engineering specifically. All of our work until very recently has been, 99% solar energy projects. We are trying to leverage our skill sets and offer, structural engineering for someone that has a retaining wall that needs to be repaired or replaced or updated, or someone that needs an arc flash study at their building that isn't related to a solar project, but still is electrical engineering. So for us, we've had to diversify that way and use the skills that we have, but cast a wider net so that if things with solar really go down the drain for a little while, that we have other, outlets for our staff and for our services. And ultimately, I think if we're talking in terms of 5 or 10 year outlooks, I think it's going to keep going up, but
yeah, it's not
it's
going
sort of
anywhere.
like, yeah, I don't think so. And you can't really argue
ride,
with,
like you said, the solar coaster.
yeah, and you can't really argue with the economics of solar. It's pretty much the cheapest form of energy, that you can deploy at the moment. We're confident in that, but also continuing to expand and just solidify what we can do to protect ourselves too.
That's smart. I mean, the original reason that you started the business was you noticed that there was a need for services. So all you got to do is, what can we do and what problems are people having? So that seems like the best solution. Can you tell me maybe as of like right now, is there one service that's like the bread and butter of your business, or is it pretty varied?
Yeah, I guess the bread and butter of our service is like a little package that involves, I guess, 3 or 4 services. So before a solar project is built, you need to get a building permit. And so we work pretty much exclusively B2B with solar developers or installers, and they do the selling of the project to, the property owner. And then they bring us in as the engineer contractor.
Yeah.
So we have a small piece of the pie. So that piece of the pie for us, that's our bread and butter, is a site survey where we will measure the roof, fly a drone above the roof, do a roof survey, check all the electrics on site, the breaker panel, the meter, those type of things. We will structurally assess the roof, take measurements of the rafters and joists and things like that, and then design, put that into a 2D CAD drawing, design the project, and then the engineer signs and seals it. And then we give a full building permit package, whatever that might be, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages of documentation back to the developer, and it's ready to go. They just take it to the building department, pay the fees, and ideally it gets approved and goes straight through. Obviously, there's revisions and other comments and things that need to be addressed a lot of the time, but that is our bread and butter service. And then you don't have to take all of those services. If you only need structural engineering, we'll happily come in and just do that if that's all you need. But those are our core services, and that's across residential, commercial, and small utility scale projects.
Okay. So how are you connecting with these solar companies to form these partnerships?
Matt is our business development guy or sales guy, I guess. So we go to all the trade shows, and we have a pretty strong online presence with our website and just SEO and Google Ads and those types of things. But the best, a lot of these developers are doing, tens or hundreds of projects a year. The residential guys, SunPower is no longer in business. That was one of our bigger clients. Palmetto, they're not offering residential solar anymore, but, these sort of companies are doing multiple thousand residential projects a year. So, one of those clients can keep you, extremely busy, 300-400 projects a month. So a lot of it's repeat work, and same on the commercial side. A lot of those larger developers, they'll have a portfolio of big box stores, and, not to name any specifically, but that big box store will have 800 stores across the country that they want to deploy solar on for the next 5 years. So that's a huge portfolio that just keeps us going for a couple of years. So that's how it works. And then obviously sourcing new sales as well.
Yeah, like do you have an average of how many new partnerships you would form in a year? It's probably not super high numbers just because one is so valuable.
Yeah, it's tricky to I'd say we're constantly growing. Our revenue's growing year over year, and that means that our client base is growing and our staff numbers are growing each year too. So we're probably picking up 25% new clients each year, which in terms of a number is probably like 15, 20, 25 maybe new clients a year. That there's always clients that come in with a handful of jobs and you never see them again. But I'm talking about
Sure. Yeah.
retained, ongoing business.
Long-term, big, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Very
yeah.
cool. So, volatility and uncertainty aside, which I don't know if you can really even say that, but maybe if that stuff wasn't happening with tariffs, like what would the next year have looked like? Or I guess what are going to be the main upcoming initiatives? Is it just offering these different services that aren't directly linked to solar? Like, what's the goal for the next year?
Yeah, like I said, the residential market has been horrible the last 18 months, and we've lost most of our major clients in that sector. But I guess not looking back and looking forward, we're hoping for a lot of growth in our legal boundary survey business that we've started. We're hoping for a lot of growth in our Exactus engineering business that complements the skill sets that we have. Where batteries also specifically are really coming thick and fast across the solar industry. So that's something that everyone's trying to keep up with. It seems like there's a new battery being deployed like every month, and you've got to figure out how does this work and how does it fit in electrically with the system. And it's just an evolving space that's changing like, literally every quarter. Like there's new technology coming out and it works a little bit differently. So that's an area where we also foresee like more stability and growth over the coming years too. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's good. No, it does. I guess the other half of that question is if you could kind of solve a challenge right now. It's like you lost a lot of these residential partnerships. What would be a magic one fix for that problem? Or, I don't know if that's a bad question.
No, it's funny because it's not. We actually had a problem where one or two of our residential clients for a couple of years were like 30% of our revenue for the year, and when you lose one of them, it's like
that's huge.
It really hurts.
Devastating.
So what we've actually been trying to do is not get a one fix solution. We've been trying to diversify so that we don't have that issue again. So we're trying to do the exact opposite.
That's a perfect answer to a dumb question.
Yeah, I wouldn't
that
say
makes
it's
sense.
dumb.
Well, it's a little cliche, I guess, but that makes sense. You have to diversify your offer and your market so that you can handle hits to any different sector. But I guess that brings its own set of challenges. Like, is the marketing approach different when going after these different types of jobs than what you're used to?
Yeah, very much so. There's quite a steep learning curve, which we're going through at the moment, of clients asking you this question, and you're like, oh, like we've been answering the same
I don't know.
15. Yeah, we've been answering the same sort of 15 questions. I guess like if you get 100 questions a month, 90 of them are repeat questions in solar that you just have continually been getting for the last 5-10 years. And now we haven't seen any of these questions with some of these new ones. So it's like we're going through that learning curve, which there's a lot of challenges, and we're working with our engineers and who are fortunately, very smart people. And I guess that's what an engineer does. They figure it out. And
yeah.
The challenge is sort of figuring out the technicalities of it and then relaying that in layman's terms to someone that might not be a specialist in electrical engineering or structural engineering. So that's sort of a key ingredient there as well, and interpreting what needs to be done.
That's interesting because whenever you're developing a go-to-market strategy, there's always an awareness and an education piece, but you're kind of doing it at the same time. You're like, you have to educate yourself as to how to best speak to these people and figure out exactly how to frame it and how to work your messaging, but you're learning as you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things that you learn starting a business. You have all these ideas about what a good business should be and having a business plan and how it's going to work and all these types of things. But really, there's nothing more valuable than market experience and just selling it and then seeing
Absolutely.
what issues present themselves and what the client, you can think what the client needs, but they will tell you what they need, and then it becomes very apparent.
Yeah, it's the whole analogy of building the plane as you're flying.
Yeah, it is a little
That's a
bit like
little
that.
too dangerous of an analogy, but I think it applies. It's like if you don't start, you're not going to learn the lessons. And I like the fail fast and just let the people tell you what they need and have good data, and then you're
Yeah,
growing every year for 10 years.
yeah. Like I said, we've been doing structural and electrical engineering work for a long time, so it's not a huge. I wouldn't put it as far as saying, fix the plane while you're flying sort of thing. It's more,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, just learn a little bit extra on a specific task, and we've been able to figure it out. And we're starting small with residential and minor type projects. We're not out there trying to rebuild another Hoover Dam or something like that just yet. So
Sure.
yeah,
Just yet.
well, we've got our
Okay.
big ambitions.
Yeah, true. Well, is there anything that you'd like to end with that you'd like to highlight, or just letting people know how they can get in touch?
Yeah, I think solar is continuing to grow and expand. So if you haven't thought about solar for your business or your home, it's definitely worth thinking about and just looking at the economics of that. And if it's not this year, then it's definitely going to be pretty economically feasible in the next couple of years. I'm happy to reach out and talk to anyone that's curious about what we do. You can reach me on LinkedIn or Exactus Energy through the webpage, exactusenergy.com. And I don't have a lot more to add than that.
Well, that's perfect. Well, thank you for the conversation and for the education on this sector of the market. So appreciate what you're doing.
No worries. I really appreciate the time to chat with you too, Megan.
My pleasure. That's a wrap on today's conversation with Eddie Obeliunas of Exactus Energy. I loved hearing about how they've adapted and diversified to stay resilient in a changing industry. There's so much to take away from their approach. If you're a solar developer or just curious about how professional services support this space, be sure to check out their work at exactusenergy.com or connect with Eddie on LinkedIn. And don't forget to follow Green Disruptors for more conversations with the founders shaping the future of climate tech.